here we go. No notes. There's nothing in front of me. It's you, me, microphone, my AKAPADers, P.A. DeLuca here. The film buff. We're talking about the greatest comic book adaptation of all time today. And the reason for that is I realized I never really spoke to all of you about this movie. And it's fun to gloss over what we think the greatest of something is, or the greatest of a genre. This is a comic book adaptation. It's not so much of a superhero movie. It's not so much of a superhero adaptation. The Watchmen is a singular beginning, middle, and 12-issue maxi series published by DC Comics between 1986 and 1987. Zack Snyder walked into this story, and he became it. He molded himself into the comic book panels, and what he brought us is equal. What is on screen is equal to what is on the page. You can understand one and understand both. This movie is great cliff notes to have a deeper understanding of what happens inside of those pages. AKA Padders, I am proud, I am happy to bring you The Watchmen, the ultimate cut, what I consider to be the greatest comic book adaptation of all time. Let's go.
Quiet on the set.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Yeah, it's we gotta hit some of the Zack Snyder stuff right away, because it's to have a proper conversation about Zack Snyder, we have to talk about where things are in social media. Only because social media controls so much of the conversation about movies. As of right now, social media, in my mind, is colluding to derail Avengers Doomsday. It's colluding to derail Predator Badlands. There's a third one in there. I'm forgetting it. But social media isn't kind to movies, nor is it kind to filmmakers that some individuals feel somehow represent something wacky. Like a certain regime, a certain regime from WW2. That is so far not the case. Zack Snyder, if you listen to him when he speaks, because there's a lot out there with this guy, he's an artist. He really is. He's a teenager that became an artist. He's a filmmaker with an eye. And we see that in his early commercials. We see that in a lot of his production work or his making of music videos. He's a visual guy, so much so that some of the biggest brands in the world, some of the biggest entities leaned on him to make commercial. It's almost like you have to be our voice and we're leaning on you. And he did all of this from a very young age. His love of heavy metal, the Heavy Metal magazine, that really was an adult fantasy for multiple, maybe 2 straight generations of geeks and dorks and and nerds. He makes a movie called Sucker Punch that is a straight up love letter. That might be the closest thing. Sucker Punch might be the closest thing to a live action heavy metal we've ever gotten. And then he gets into the DC universe, the DCEU, gets into that with Man of Steel. And somewhat there's a main date along the way. There's a crossover with Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan kind of brings back the DC characters to the big screen with, the excuse me, the Dark Knight trilogy. Not much of a trilogy, because you guys know how I feel about that third one. But we kind of have this approach, right? We have this approach to the Man of Steel, but then the main date shifts. So it kind of becomes like this Nolan-esque, Zack Snyder visioned, executed Superman movie. But then everything becomes, we need to have a superhero universe right away. And we want to say Warner Brothers sacrificed the artistry and, the Oscars, for lack of a, right? The Oscars for fanfare and leaning into the audience that would be a hardcore nucleus to drive a brand. That's what Marvel did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So he's like caught up in that. But when we look at Suicide Squad, and we look at Wonder Woman, and we look at Aquaman, and we look at Superman versus Batman, we see there's this emergence of a cohesive universe. But before all of that, well, we have a solid remake with Dawn of the Dead. Solid. I don't care what anyone says. And then we have an adaptation of 300. 300, Frank Miller's. It's not a graphic novel. It was a 6-issue miniseries that's later collected. But, whatever. People call Watchmen a graphic novel. It's a maxi series. Don't come at me with that. But 300 is, we can argue, a perfect adaptation in its own right. And then from there, he moves into Watchmen. And he knows he's going to change the ending of this movie. And we talk about the Ultimate Cut, because the Ultimate Cut has an animated Black Freighter sequence rolled in. The Ultimate Cut also has adjacent documentaries about Under the Hood, which is the Thomas Howell, I believe it's Thomas Howell, the original Night Owl. And this is all like in book, in movie, in universe. But he produces like a news segment about this book that's a fictional book within the Watchmen universe. But it's all rolled into the Ultimate Cut. But he knows he's going to change the ending. He knows that he's going to get into all of this extra material. One of the most important artifacts from this movie is that there's a portrait book. It's called Watchmen Portraits. And it's all the portraits of the different characters and the levels of detail sprayed throughout this entire movie. And that book is featured on my YouTube channel, is eye-opening. It's jaw-dropping and eye-opening. But to stay true to him switching up the ending, because there's a little bit of a perception change when it comes to what this movie does at the end. Maybe we've had a lot of commentators that missed what happens at the ending and missed the point of the ending. But it kind of switches it to, and DC Comics later did this. They further butchered it, so you can't just blame it on Zack. They butchered it with Doomsday Clock, by the way. HBO further butchered it with that crazy Watchmen miniseries. I will never watch that, by the way. But he gets Dave Gibbons to come back and illustrate, to draw new comic book pages of this ending. And the ending is that Ozymandias, our hero, because he's not a villain. I'm sorry. Ozymandias is a hero in the Watchmen story. He tricks Dr. Manhattan, who has lost his humanity and his connection to anything earthly, and he gives him a reason to leave Earth, and he needs to leave Earth anyway. Like, it doesn't belong on Earth. And what we get is, from that, we get utopia, as said in the Watchmen, issue 12, part of the maxi series, or at the end of the graphic novel if you buy that, or the collected edition. And Zack Snyder identifies panels. We can watch this movie and then flip through the pages, and some of the framing, the panels, the coloring, the costumes, it is like a one-to-one reproduction. The attitudes, the emotion, the evolution of some of these characters, where they have a reawakening, comes through. A part of the Watchmen is this apocalypse within this apocalypse. See, the apocalypse is that Ozzy, and the reason why I call Ozymandias the hero, and if you watch the movie, he clearly is the hero. He creates a utopia, and he frees his friends. See, he frees them of the world that is constraining them. Rorschach is constrained because the world is so brutal, and he is almost in his own right caught in a loop. Dr. Manhattan has lost his humanity, and he needs to leave Earth, and he has to leave Earth untethered. he lets the comedian discover everything, because Ozymandias knows everything that happens around all the events of this movie, and he lets the comedian go. The comedian, in a way, is living a failed life. He didn't help. He never became what he wanted to become, and he actually added to the problem and the confusion of the world. He was not righteous, and that's why the movie begins with the elimination of the comedian. These are all concepts and ideas that are very clear from Zack Snyder's interpretation, but it's not really an interpretation, it's an adaptation. He's taking the page and giving it to us on the screen. AKA Powders, I cannot argue enough the importance of not only watching this movie but knowing it. And I feel like if you're a true film buffer out there, you will incorporate this movie in your regular film studies. I'm sorry, gotta say it, gotta give you guys some homework. Watchmen, the ultimate cut, one of my favorites.
Okay, that's a wrap.